My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Cole Ross.
And you're listening to Watch Out for Fireballs. It is a Games Club podcast.
And this week we're talking about Dandara, which is a Metroidvania game developed by Long Hat House and published by Raw Fury for the PC, consoles, and iOS in 2018.
Yeah, and this episode was executive produced by Micah. Thanks, you,
Micah.
Yeah. I think when Micah chose this, part of Micah's like, this is a neat, like an interesting game that I've never heard anyone talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And this was under my radar as well.
Yeah.
Were you aware of this?
I had only heard of it because Dan from Innuendo Studios was like posting about it because they were going through a bunch of Metroidvania things just as a project. And this was mentioned kind of alongside like Space Station Alpha, I think is the other one there, as being like real standouts from that little from that little experiment. So that was the only context in which I'd heard of this.
I'm kind of surprised that it's got all the hallmarks of something that I would have heard of.
Yeah.
And then like I got very complicated feelings on this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like I at the end of the day, I did not like playing it very much for the most part. And it is interesting, but then there's also like what is lost in translation for it. Like it's a game where I wish I had heard about it because I wanted to read more about what other people thought of it.
Yeah.
To get additional kind of like critical grounding in thinking about it.
Yes.
And I felt now, that we played and we're getting ready to talk about it. I feel a little adrift in that because like I have my experience, but I can't help but feel like it's an incomplete picture, and wanting to thread a needle because this deals with a culture I'm not very familiar with, and not wanting to shit on something like that.
Yes.
It's a tricky game kind of to talk about, I think.
Yeah. I kind of just have to separate the presentation from the mechanics.
Yes.
And evaluate the mechanics primarily because
it's a wireframe it a bit.
Yeah. Those were made first. Like that was, and the developers in interviews are pretty open about being like, hey, we're not writers. Like we're just kind of making a thing. So what you're saying, I definitely also feel to a degree. But we still got a job to do, I guess.
We still got a job to do.
Yeah,
same. Like I feel, but it just feels weird. I don't want, especially whenever I feel this way, where it's not like a fun hate fest. It's the way I was thinking about this game is like a 7 out of 10 derogatory.
Yeah.
Whenever I feel that way about a thing that either has representation or cultural cachet or is sponsored by a patron, I always feel a little guilty. About it.
Yeah. For me, the best that this accomplishes is it is a new and unique gameplay idea that was worth exploring, and they are, it was worth exploring. They explored it fully, and it ended up not being kind of
I don't
great.
think it's very good.
Yeah. It was worth trying it, but I don't know that ultimately it was worth having a whole game around it, right?
Yeah, it's got big ludum dare, like, oh, that's neat. You know, and you never know when that's going to happen. Like, that's how Superhot came out, and then Superhot was definitely worth continuing with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's just I've been thinking about how to talk about this for a long time. So this is a game. It's about a woman named Dandara, who's the embodiment of creative forces in this world. The world is called the Salt, who is brought to life to fight against a militaristic overlord named Eldar, and he has his forces of intention.
Yeah.
Through there are a lot of nouns and word usages in this that feel like translation things to me. And I can't get mad at them, but I also at the same time they still feel awkward to me. Like, then oppression came, and like oppression's very general.
Yeah.
Like things like that, like the forces of intention. Like, well, that's, again, it feels very general. Like there's a generality sense to some of this.
Based on the way they talk about it, I really do feel like they are kind of playing in broad allegory with this. So it eventually kind of came down to the thing is named after the thing it's supposed to represent, and we're just supposed to kind of sit with that, right?
Yeah.
Because they talked about they're like, okay, this actual historical figure is an inspiration broadly, but instead we wanted to kind of like put that into something we know, as people want to create something, and ultimately, telling the story of this world that is separated into creation and logic, basically, creativity and logic, and the way one can encroach on the other. Yeah.
When I say things are general or have awkward uses, I think that you're right on in that, like, things are directly representative instead of being metaphorical in a way that you might expect. So like when in the intro, when they talk about like a golden idea spread.
Yes.
Like ordinarily you would think that would be something to be evocative in this. But it's just an odd phrasing for this as, a golden idea. Like you think of that as good. Generally,
no.
It's not. It's greed and materialism. In this game. So it's just there's a hook to this. So we were talking about it, dancing around. This is the thing that is interesting, but I don't think quite works. This is in the broad category of game like platformers where you don't jump. There aren't that many of those. The way this works is there's no gravity, so you can never just move on the surface you're on. Right. You don't jump, you don't run. What you do is you point at an area and you kind of zip between bits of surfaces that have this white salt coating on them, to position yourself to attack and to dodge and to get around.
Jumping from pretzel to pretzel.
You go from Wetzels to Auntie Annie's, like some kind of mall-bound teen.
Yes. Yeah. So it is, it's a really fast jump. There's timing involved. It's not like a straight up teleport. You can run into things and projectiles, as it's going. So you gotta, make sure you're timing it just right. It is limited in range, and it really is kind of like moving from point to point.
Yes. And this has, we'll finish describing it, but the way this affects the entire game is fucking crazy in terms of how this affects feel. So like, the way this is done on a gamepad, they want you to play it on a gamepad, is you push your, controller strongly recommended. It pops up when you start the game.
Yeah.
Is pushing the stick in a direction and pressing jump. It will give you, it has a very generous auto aim.
Yeah.
It will kind of snap you to grid to certain places, and it will show you the line that you will jump in. If you can't jump to the range, you'll know. Like the visual feedback is really good for that. You always know you can get there. On mobile, originally you just swiped.
Yes.
In the direction. Swiping one direction did the jumps, swiping the other direction did attacks.
Yeah. Or on one side of the screen or the other. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And what this does is make everything hard. You can't, and here's a thing I figured out. I beat this a while ago, and I picked it up just to play it, and I was like, trying to put my finger on something. It's that when you dodge all the way to the other side of the room.
Yes.
like in a game with no subtle movements where there are projectiles and bullet hell kind of things, it is oftentimes advantageous not to over dodge.
Yes.
You know, I think about Enter the Gungeon, and like one of the 101 levels of Enter the Gungeon is like, you don't always have to dodge roll. You can just walk out of the way of a bullet.
Yeah.
You can never do that in Dandara.
No.
You can only ever zip to the ceiling or floor, or you can only change surfaces. So it fucks with positioning so much. Like, it's really, it puts you on hold a lot. Like, I can't attack from this new position because I can't hit. So I just need to move out of the way of this projectile and then move back.
Yeah.
It feels awful. I fucking hate how it feels.
I was thinking about it, and like, it's not quite as bad as trying to walk with your shoes tied together. But something I run into when I try and ride my bike wearing my jeans is like, sometimes my pant leg will get caught in the chain, right? Yeah. And like, everything has to stop, and then it hitches, and like, okay, I've got to get it pulled out of there, and then get back up. It's kind of like that happening for what should feel like the most basic things.
But like, it'd be like if you're riding your bike and you were riding your bike through a bullet hell.
Yeah.
You know, like you're riding your bike through a war zone and you have to do this. Like, we have to dodge all the things. I imagine you're not dodging that much on your bike.
Probably not. No.
But I've never done it.
Yeah. It's a little bit like tethered swimming, right? It's TS for you. I don't feel right. Yeah. And it does have kind of bad effects on it. I noticed this more in the stages than in the bosses. I think the boss fights in this are actually really good.
Me too.
Yeah. But for any given challenge, enemies are mostly stationary or they have a small range of movement. But for any of these situations that you're trying to get through, there are only maybe two, most of the time one places where you can be to actually affect them, to kill that enemy or deal with that threat. And when you are dealing with things that move periodically or in a pattern, a lot of it is just about like trying to goad out their attack so you can be safe getting close to them, while also kind of negotiating and waiting for the pattern to open up so you can get there. So it is an awful lot of waiting on hold and then needing to act very, very immediately
to do one tick of damage to sometimes enemies that require you to do this multiple times.
Yes.
And then is further complicated by stage hazards, which this game absolutely adores, putting a thing on a platform that effectively appears and disappears. So like spikes that come out of the ground, or a thing that goes back and forth on the platform that you have to dodge, that are invincible. So while you're doing this fight thing, you also have to be keeping in mind dodging the thing on the floor, in addition to bullets and stuff that are temporary. This sounds like that could be exciting and dynamic. It slows everything down so much.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be careful and intentional, which I like. But one of the things that I'm realizing, that the other reason why I feel like this fell flat for me, is I'm experiencing some Metroidvania fatigue, kind of generally. That is not a good, slow and intentional genre.
No.
You want to be able to move quickly because you're backtracking a lot, because you're trying to explore every nook and every cranny. It feels at cross purposes.
Yeah.
Really, and like you mentioned, especially in the levels, the bosses I think are also very good. There's 3 of them, but all 3 of them are really interesting. The bosses are great. And if this had just been like a boss rush game, or it had taken the levels and really, really shrink it down, I could see this working a lot better. As an overall kind of product.
And it's also, a little bit frustrating, because when an area is cleared and you're just moving through the space, like zap, 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 it does feel good and fluid, right?
Yeah.
Because of that auto aim, kind of thing. The second there is any kind of complication, it ends up being pretty rough. I don't want people to think that we're just complaining because it's hard or it's different. Over the course of the 12 hours I think I spent with this game, I should have gotten my sea legs under me, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Would be my expectation for a game as novel as this, or for any game, right?
Yeah. That's a long time to wait to get used to a control scheme.
Yeah.
And contrast again, when I think about non-traditional platformers where you don't jump, like, we're both big Bionic Commando guys.
Absolutely.
Bionic Commando rocks, and it feels like they designed a game that supported the movement system a little bit more than this.
It never became fluid, and for me, the joy in this kind of thing comes with fluidity. The control scheme never disappeared in my hands, and that was a little bit frustrating to kind of like constantly feel it like needling at my neck.
And it's also, in addition to like it's we don't like 'cause hard, it is really fucking hard though.
Yeah,
it's not just a little challenging. Like the game is a lot challenging. There are end game gauntlets of this game that can absolutely get fucked. And enemies that can absolutely get fucked. And part of the reason why it feels worth complaining about is not just like, oh no, it's a hard enemy. It's hard in an artificial feeling way, because every time I dodge, I'm doing that dodge dance where I can be in one safe area to do an attack.
Yeah.
And this actually like dovetails with a bunch of other decisions that are in the Metroidvania part that feel like anti-fun decisions to me, that are all in service of this movement thing. Like an example, we'll talk about these as we get them, and this is jumping ahead a couple points, but I think it's worth noting in terms of just the feel bad, is that like you never get I can jump further. Almost every Metroidvania ability is a lock and a key thing. When you're next to a certain thing, you can jump further. If I could just jump further in general, I could use that in combat.
Yes.
And they could design the harder combat encounters around my increased abilities. However, all of my increased abilities are just like keys to doors. They're just, if there's a doodad here, I can do this thing and I need to do it to move further.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can use in combat in terms of movement stuff.
Yeah. It's, every video game is like this, but Metroidvania games specifically, it is about kind of this kind of rubber band tension between your character's capabilities and the expectations that the design puts on them.
Yes.
And when that formula works really, really well, you like go through a space and it's really difficult because you lack the tool, and then you get the thing that makes it that unlocks that unlocks what the space is designed around about like halfway through, and then suddenly it changes everything and then recontextualizes previous spaces, because everything stays relatively static in both the movement and in the combat. You never have any of those rewards.
No, I never felt that feeling.
Yeah,
like it is a Metroidvania in which it did not feel good to get new things.
Yes.
Which is a really damning thing to say, and I intended it so. Like you eventually get weapons and everything like that, but those are also tied to a thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just anti-fun elements to this, it feels like. It has a tight grip. So everything takes a lot of steps to do. The screen will rotate at times. This is a world with no up. So it will change. The map doesn't rotate. So there's a lot of basically like reading glyphs, looking at where doors are, and then rotating the map in your mind with where those doors are to make your way. And this is a big map with a lot of dead ends that are hilariously named like Cloister of Forgiveness. And all it has is like, $20 in it. You got to get that $20 from the Cloister of Forgiveness, and shit like that. So it's a big, complicated map with lots of dead end treasure rooms that you are constantly having to figure out in your head how to orient.
I would very much like to know the decision-making process for those map twists that end up happening.
Yeah.
Or for the screen twists. Just because it never really felt like, I don't know. It didn't feel like it should have been necessary, given that the spaces. Yeah.
Yeah. If they're up, doesn't matter. If there's no gravity, then like putting this down is just as artificial as putting it up.
Yeah.
Just leave it, have it be constant to the map, and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just it clangs. It doesn't quite fit, and I ended up going in circles more often than I would like to admit.
Yeah.
Because even though the different like biomes are well differentiated between each other, you are still working with a kind of a consistent tile set in each of them, and there's a little bit of a lack of meaningful kind of milestones or landmarks. Yeah.
There's an interesting aesthetic that is instead a background palette over things rather than a landmark, and all of the rooms are just rectangles and tubes connecting rectangles, basically.
Mm-hmm.
There is no like a shape of a room.
Yeah.
That's gonna do it for you, I don't think.
Let's talk about the combat. So your main attack, your only real attack throughout the entire game, is kind of a shotgun blast. Has a limited range, goes in a fan, and there is a charge time to it. Remember everything we said about the narrow windows and small, only one or two places where you can be to do damage. Add a charge time to that.
Yeah.
And you end up with something that, again,
it's very
issues tied together.
Yeah, it's extremely restrictive. Like, you have to charge, and not having the range thing means you don't like look at the room and be like, okay, I can take that guy out before I get there. You have to be there to take him out. So this little dance that you're doing in, jump to the ceiling, charge, attack, jump to the floor, wait for the thing, jump to the ceiling. You have to do it.
Yeah.
Like making this a beam that went, or like a beam, but like a bullet that went across the screen. I don't understand why you wouldn't do it. It doesn't feel overpowered to me. You're never seeing that much screen at once. It would just allow you to take out a couple of enemies at range. Who cares? Like, I don't know. It just drives me nuts how tightly restrictive this is.
Yeah.
I hate the shotgun.
Yeah, the charge time, again, I felt the presence of it the entire time, especially when things got much more difficult, because the charge time eliminated really any margin you had on timing.
Well, and for me, it shunted me into a like, okay, am I supposed to be fighting? Like, this sucks. Am I just supposed to be dodging and moving through this? And for a little while, I did that. Like, eventually you get enough health upgrades to where you can tank some hallways, but you are not supposed to be doing that. They eventually introduce enemies that will do way too much damage to you. You are meant to be slowly and methodically doing them, but the combat ends up having a very similar rhythm throughout because your verbs have not changed.
No. You do find a couple of pickups that increase the range on on this, which is welcome, but also not enough.
Yeah, and not for a while.
Yeah.
There are special weapons that you get, but you have a mana bar. You have this energy bar, that will, and it cannot be replenished by one of the things that the old Metroid, proper Metroid, not Metroidvania games did, that is very canny, is having enemies drop stuff.
Yes.
It is a self-fulfilling system. This, because it has this little Dark Souls DNA in it, these are replenished by a blue Estus flask. Right. In here. That refills on respawn, just like our regular Estus flask, which refills on respawn, along with a couple other little Dark Souls borrowings that I wish the enemies just dropped little health pickups and little ammo pickups.
It'd be nice. To sustain a run.
If I could use my special weapons in this with abandon, not like unlimited, but there'd be a little risk reward. Like, I can get through this combat encounter quicker, and maybe I'll slowly dwindle these things, but I can count on pickups in the field. I would have more options, and it would make some of these combat encounters feel a little bit more dynamic, I think.
Yeah. It's also hewing to a version of Souls that isn't necessarily true, that doesn't actually exist. Like, in every Dark Souls game, one a little bit less so, but like in Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, and Dark Souls 3, like, enemies would drop recovery pickups.
Yes.
Either for health or for your mana when it was the case. So like there was a way for a run to be self-sustaining and not just checkpoint to checkpoint. This is purely checkpoint to checkpoint.
Yes. Which, again, it does feel intentional. I don't think that's an accident.
No.
I just don't like it. Yeah. Like, you gain souls. This is called salt. You get it from killing enemies. You also find them in treasure chests around things. You spend this at campsites, which are bonfires, basically. And you have a very simple level up system. You have a health and energy bar. And then also how much your blue and orange Estus heal you, your health and energy refills, how much they give you.
Yeah. Don't neglect those recovery ones.
Yeah.
That it is always worth leveling those first. The effectiveness of your recovery options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you only have 4 things you're upgrading.
Yeah.
So generally, like, keeping them even works basically throughout. It's not like you're making a build.
Yeah.
This could have been replaced by just a linear level system and been unchanged.
Yeah.
Like, this is character customization to no end.
If you die, you'll respawn at the last camp that you visited. Those are your bonfires. And then you have to get back to where you died in order to recover your souls that you dropped. Something that is welcome, again, is the accessibility options. You can enable more frequent checkpoints. Additionally, this is something that I had to do. They have an option, so when you die, you respawn on the same screen.
Yeah, I had to do that near the end.
Yeah,
because some of these gauntlets again are really hateful.
Yeah, it was only once I got into the final fortress area that I had to turn that on. Yeah.
And it's one of those things too where it's like I would not have felt rewarded powering through that, and I just needed to be done.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to apologize for that. Like I was scrambling for the I get it button.
Mm-hmm.
My desire to stop playing and my desire to see was slowly overtaking my desire to see what they did with the final boss fight. And I was running out of time.
Yeah.
So like I was on a meter there. So as we mentioned, your abilities don't change very much. Your basic attack, you get some range upgrades. You have bonus weapons that use that mana meter. The bonus weapons are fine.
Mm-hmm.
Not super exciting, but they're fine. It's a bummer that you have to refill them with a resource.
Yes.
That is limited, so you only get so much ammo, and you cannot get more until you reset enemies and such.
Yeah, and we alluded to how unsatisfying the movement things are. It's really funny because like you'll talk to somebody and they'll say, "Oh, now you can get now you can use this block," and it is literally just when you stand on it, you can make it disappear and then move beyond it.
A lot of keys, locking keys, which are the a Metroidvania crime.
Yeah.
IMO, flashback to Wave Souls or whatever, where one of your Metroidvania abilities was summoning a ghost that owned a key.
Ender Lilies was that one. Yeah.
So there's only a few bosses. If you're not doing the extended version, there's three. Three real bosses. There's a couple of mini bosses as well. And the bosses are all good. Surprisingly good. They integrate this form of platforming and actual fights really well. It's kind of surprising. The boss rush version of this I think would be real good. Like the Titan Souls version of this. And I'm never going to say give me the Titan Souls version of something, but like this is, give me the Titan Souls version of Dandara.
Yeah, this is where it really felt like they were at their most creative.
Yes.
And like where they were kind of like working within their competencies and exploring what they could do with this, like, with this interaction model, right? Because but every boss comes with its own particular arena. One of them, like the boss kind of is the arena itself. Like that's where the gold is here, I say.
I think so too. Like it basically justifies it being worth a play, even if I didn't have very much fun during my time.
Yes.
Like that stuff was really neat. Moving on to aesthetics. This is a pretty game. It's very colorful, has detailed pixel art to it, and the soundtrack is pretty good. Nothing that's going to absolutely blow my mind, but not too bad.
Yeah.
Through this, reasonable.
Yeah. There's lively music, there's creepy music. I like the distinction that they bring in between kind of the more natural and then the like the sci-fi future fortress kind of stuff. It works pretty well. The world and story are, pronounced but vague. We kind of talked about that at the beginning. Very, very direct in the way that it, and the way that things are named after what they're supposed to represent.
Except for when they're not. Like they are, and then you go into you walk into a corner of a room that has nothing in it and is called Cathedral of Hopelessness. And I'm like, that's not what that is, though.
Yeah.
People on this website will say anything. That's not true. That's not the Cathedral of Hopelessness.
Yeah. This is not the room where Charlie Brown's hose are kept.
Yeah. Like the Charlie Brown harem. So it is largely, whenever anyone's talking or explaining the plot, it's as direct as possible. Whenever they're trying to go for flavor or evocative side things, it feels a little bit like a broken promise to me.
Yeah.
Just because of how little incident there is in these levels.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning this because I don't know where else to talk about it. There's not, because it's an aesthetic thing. So like the first area you go to, it's a village. And you know it's a village because the backdrop, not the actual level geometry, has like street signs and graffiti and things. This influenced by Brazil and Brazilian culture. That's neat as an idea.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It doesn't make anything feel like a space even a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just feels like levels that have a paint job to me.
Yeah.
They all just feel like video game hallways.
Mm-hmm.
With just a background.
And this is, an endemic Metroidvania problem.
Yes. Right? And when Metroidvania is avoided at all, it's always really noteworthy.
Yes.
And one of the ways that they can avoid it a little bit is just through having like physical landmarks, even in the geometry, right? Mm-hmm. So like you think about Symphony of the Night, we all remember the big stairwell that goes up to the cathedral in the upper left corner of the map. Like, because it's a big long set of stairs with like interesting enemies on it. This game doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Everything's basically corridors and rectangles with a different coat of paint in the background.
Yeah.
No.
It's a bummer. Also aesthetically, thing that is not great to me is that there's really no subversion in this until you get to the DLC and the final boss there, and then like what that's supposed to represent, and that is cool. That is a good idea. And, the developers and interviews that I read, they're really open about not being writers. So they're kind of doing their best here.
I don't want to bully them, just because I didn't react to the story very well. Like, I think it could have used a writer.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like, hey, dum-dums, just have money to hire a writer.
Go hire someone.
Just, I understand. But if I think that the product would have been better with a collaborator, in that respect.
Yeah. Getting on to development stuff, I pulled details for this section from an article written by the game's main developer, one of the founders of the studio, Joao Brandt, on GameDeveloper.com, and also interviews from Into the Spine and A Most Agreeable Pastime. And this is another incredibly small team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just got two. Long Hat House, established by Joao Brandt and Lucas Matos in 2014. They met studying computer science together. And Dandara is their second game. Their first one is an iOS, like a very simple iOS shmup.
Yes.
If I recall.
Yeah. So they wanted to start making indie games, and they were inexperienced and had no resources or connections, no money, and then also not like a lot of time putting this together to do anything huge. No connections to get anything published. So they thought, well, mobile games, that is far more accessible. Let's try our hand at something like that. And they started working on Dandara and the interaction model here. And then their focus changed to the Switch once Raw Fury picked them up.
Yes. The first thing they did was figuring out movement and combat. They went through multiple iterations of this zipping system before landing on what we got. Mm-hmm. The earliest versions of the game had an auto-aiming machine gun as the main weapon.
Yeah.
And they found this too easy, so they settled on the charging shotgun with limited range.
Give me a non-auto-aiming machine gun, please.
I would be curious as to how the auto-aiming one would feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like this idea of since you're spending so much time moving around, just focus on that.
Yeah.
Like we will automate the part. Like it's something that Will Hughes, friend of the network and Everything to Guppy, talked about in a recent piece on the AV Club about Vampire Survivors likes.
Yes.
And like, I don't like Vampire Survivors very much, but the idea, like, since you're going to be shooting anyway, let's just take that away from you.
Yeah.
I think is not a bad idea. And I can see a version of this that works, that doubles down on movement stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have to double down on more than just the shape and density of gauntlets. You would have to give yourself, like the ability to freeze and change directions in air.
Yes.
Anything. Like you'd have to be able to affect your movement.
Yeah. So they got the mechanics down and they started thinking about the world and story. Their prototypes had just a generic soldier guy, but they felt that it was kind of uninspired. And also they wanted to work in something that reflected the fact, that they were Brazilian developers. They wanted something that was kind of representative of their cultures, kind of hoping if this got out there, it would say something about Brazil.
Yes.
And so to do that, when they were thinking about redesigning the character, they were inspired by somebody who seems really cool from Brazilian history, Dandara dos Palmares. a 17th century Afro-Brazilian freedom fighter and folk hero who fought against Portuguese colonizers and slave owners, freeing herself and many other people in the process.
Yeah. I read the Wikipedia on her. I had never heard of her. There's only like 3 things that have been based on her, which is kind of interesting, like in terms of big pop culture things. Like it feels like a story that could be mined more.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, not for like, you know, greed reasons, but just because it's an interesting story. Like, I never heard of this person.
No, and if this game, you know, it worked, like it made me learn about this thing that I didn't learn about, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or learn about this thing I didn't know about. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they like this character, you know, and there's a fine thing to base the character around, but we don't have the maturity to write a story about slavery.
Yeah.
And we don't have the resources to properly research it. So I get that, you know? So instead of making it about the specifics of this person's life, they generalized it. Yes. It's an allegorical story about freedom generally, you know, not, you know, and in a weird way, this ends up feeling, because of that, it ends up to me feeling pretty toothless. The lack of relevant detail to it, you know, like I wanted this also to be more political.
Yeah.
It's about metaphors that map onto things, but it is so abstracted that like it went too far the other direction.
Yeah. You know, sometimes logic do be sterile.
Yes.
Is ultimately kind of what it boils down to. And I've
that's not something I'm going to die for though. Like it's not like a freedom fighter puts themselves in jail to fight logic. You know, as much as the you know, like I've heard about being destroyed by logic and facts, but
it's time we fight back.
Yeah.
One nice bit of consonance that once I learned about Dandara, I also saw, and then it was fun that an interview brought it up. So the historical Dandara was a very skilled Capoeira fighter, you know, the Brazilian dance fighting, right?
Yep.
And something they latched onto was the idea like, oh yeah, this movement in combat is pretty dance-like, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. This game got pretty good reviews. Spoken of highly by niche Metroidvania people, this shows up a lot as hidden gem.
Yes.
You know, this is something doing, and I can also understand that too, if you are a Metroidvania fan to the degree that you are very much seeking novelty in that space. Which, you know, we kind of are, right? Like we did Blasphemous 2, and that felt like a little bit too straight of a putt for a Metroidvania. This is just novelty that I wish worked better for me.
Right. Yeah.
There's an expansion called Trials of Fear. This was released in 2020, added a new map, extended the story. So if you completed a bunch of optional content, you could fight the true boss. I did not do that.
No.
I was not going to do the optional content in this game.
Yeah, and lest anybody think like, "Hey, you guys, this is executive produced." Micah did like tell us how to avoid
just like,
that.
You don't have to do that. Yeah, he specifically gave us instructions on how not to do it.
Yeah.
So you know, Micah's cool.
Yes.
You know, I don't think Micah's going to be too mad about it.
Yeah, and you know, it's because it's challenge fuck stuff. If the game had spoken to me in a huge way, if this was inherently fun in the hands, I would have pursued it just so I could speak about it. As it stands, I did dip into it a bit, so I can at least speak about it a little bit. It's too hard. This is not a situation where like I did the hell level of cave story because I like cave story so much.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, and it's not even like the White Palace in Hollow Knight, right? Like that's the closest thing it's compared to, but it adds a true ending. You know, it's much more, you know, necessary to a complete story. And then also, I love that game.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't, and I still didn't do the White Palace. Like I could see doing that first.
So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start at the game, and the opening has kind of this little scene setting. Talks about how peaceful this world of the salt was before this cancerous golden idea grew. You know, vaguely this kind of empire of logic that started encroaching and separating the world between these
oppression.
Worlds. Yes. And when oppression came, Dandara woke up at the crib of creation to begin to fight it. Dandara, you know, it's unclear if all of the people in this world are supposed to be kind of these manifestations of ideas, but Dandara is broadly a manifestation of resistance.
Yes, freedom. freedom resistance.
Yeah.
So we do a little tutorial learning about how to move around as Dandara, and the tutorial teaches you just fine.
Yeah.
It's introducing all of the things you need to do. It's introducing little bits that are going to be in your way, that you have to wait to move before you jump to platforms.
Yeah, and it's showing you kind of limitations. Like, okay, in any other Metroidvania, getting down would be super easy. In this one, okay, you can't get to that platform that you need to down there directly. You've got to work your way around, right?
Yes, it's kind of hard to explain in an audio medium if you haven't played this, but it usually means you have to jump on a wall in order to jump to the floor.
Yes,
from above.
Yeah,
there are a couple screens with barriers with these weak spots you have to shoot. These will either move or you have a time limit to hit several of them that'll go through to kind of make your way through these glowing bits. There are no traditional enemies up until in this first part. There's just obstacles.
Right. This tutorial was added later. Previously, you just kind of woke up and were in the world in this creation meadow or what have you. And this is notable because the needing to shoot a bunch of stuff within a certain time limit in order to proceed, that doesn't really happen in the main game. That is something that is all over the place when you get to kind of the second map.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
We step out there and we enter the area of the Village of Artists.
Yeah.
Step into the creation meadow, and a mysterious voice calls out, telling us to seek them out.
Right.
Seek that person out.
Yeah. We follow a sign to the Village of Artists as the screen twists. And a little way in, we find our map. We also find the Essence of Salt, which is the game's Estus flask.
Yes.
It is funny that everything from the world to the god of the world to your souls to also your health it's all salt.
It's all salt all the way down, which is a colonized Souls-like noun. I want to also point out how weird the treasure chest opening animation is.
Okay.
Half of them you open, the other half you walk into like a door.
Oh yeah.
Did you notice that? It just overlays the going into a door in the background animation on opening a treasure chest.
Yeah, to take you to the like item get screen.
Yeah, and then you leave it. It's really strange. Like the treasure chest isn't shaped like a door. It's just a normal treasure chest, but you walk into the background and then it shows you the item get screen.
I'm going to file that one under nitpicks. It is weird.
It's a little bit of a nitpick. I think the reason why I notice it so much is it contributes to the general like odd sense to this with some of the verbiage. A cancerous golden idea grew. Like these things that just feel a little bit awkward to me that I assumed were translation things. So
rough edges and poor fits. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We're just kind of feeling a little bit odd,
Yeah.
Surfaces, we're going to run into surfaces here that periodically electrify through there, which is just a variation of a spike thing sliding across it. Like they're all just variations of hot and cold. It's lava, then it's not.
Yeah. We also get our first kind of enemies here, the fox spearmen, who are, you don't want to get close to them because they'll reach out at you. Eventually they get slow moving projectiles. And there are also kind of these moving spiked platforms that you need to time around.
Yep. And then we reach our first NPC. NPCs in this are either really interesting looking or just a guy.
Yep.
This first one, our Tarsila, is interesting. She's huge. And she looks like that picture of R. Crumb walking, or Homer when he's walking with the Rastafarian hat.
Yeah. It's the keep on trucking walk.
Yeah, so the keep on trucking walk, if that person, there's no perspective.
Yeah.
Like, he's superliminal, the keep on trucking walk.
This is a call out to Brazilian culture. Tarsila is the name of a famous painter.
Yes.
And they their work often featured these kind of strange proportions.
Yep. So she's very tall. She's small at the top, and then her legs get bigger and bigger, and she has huge feet.
Mm-hmm.
And the room has been built around her.
Yes. And she says, "Hey, these forces that you encountered out there, they're soldiers of the Eldarian army. They've been encroaching, and now they're here. Everybody's afraid to go out." And says, "Hey, now that you're here, I'm going to light up my paintings again." And this is basically just now these switches that you have found will activate slowly moving geometry when you stand on them.
Yep. Turns on a bunch of switches.
Yes.
Through activating paintings. Like there's something here to the idea that when people help you, they're doing it through like songs and art that should fire like a romantic urge in me. But the fact that it's just a video game platform, like, it runs in that's not the Cathedral of Despair. Like that's not a painting, that's a switch I stand on.
Yeah.
Like you're calling it a painting, but it's not a painting.
It's pretty funny. Like it'd be like, okay, so what I've granted you is, peace, being unbothered, being fulfilled, and it grants you +2 to fire damage.
It's very similar. Huge, the in control, the big unknowable entity. The first thing it does explain reloading a gun, to you, kind of energy to it too.
Yeah. I don't know how to marry those two things. I think that, but yeah, having it boiled down to now a platform will move. All of painting is summed up into that.
It's not a painting. Like I understand like it's very meta, like allegorical. It just has nothing to do with a painting. It's a weird little mechanical platform that opens up. It feels like a find and replace. It reminds me of, I'm not trying to convince you. It's just a thing that it reminds me of is the XP thing in Undertale, where it's just like, oh, these bullets are actually happiness points. Like you just change the name of something, but you don't actually change its like ludic identity at all.
Yeah.
It can feel like a cheap trick to me. This is less well executed than that one. Like I understand there's more going on there, but that's what it reminds me of. Like call something it's not. So these platforms open up more of the town we can explore. And so you move through, you reach a certain point and the voice calls out again, saying Augustus is drawing near and will bring the city to further ruin.
Right.
So got to find Augustus.
Yeah. You get to the back half of the level, kind of up and west, and we're introduced kind of these exploding eyes that will home in on you. They're kind of existent. They're visible in the background, kind of these little crannies when they're dormant. They're also, this is where the fox spearmen get the ability to shoot projectiles. There's a whole room kind of built around that. It's like this big waterfall where you got to zip around, not getting too close to them.
It's worth noting, you have analog aim for movement and attacking. So these eyes would be a big problem in like a Castlevania because they come at you from odd angles.
Yes.
You can just aim at them.
Yes.
We find essence of salt, so souls basically, in Lazuli's house. We're going to meet Lazuli later. She's not there. There are photos of Lazuli.
Yes. And then we reach beautiful Horizon Avenue. And some walls close around us, and we are in a little mini boss fight against this tank. Yep. This was the first kind of encounter that they designed to kind of like pressure test the movement kind of concept here. And yeah, it moves slowly along the surface there, tracks along with you under the floor, and shoots fireballs upward.
Yep. You dodge up to the ceiling, which is going to shoot at. Then you dodge back to the floor to shoot it.
Yes.
You take him out, you reach Tomaza's house, and he's sitting among a bunch of musical equipment depressed.
Yeah.
He learns like, hey, we destroyed the tank. He starts playing a song from the old days of the salt.
Yeah.
And this activates another kind of platform. That's not a song, but this song activates different platforms. So now there are ones that they're switches, but there are also ones that'll move when you're standing on them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tomas is modeled after the game's composer.
Yes.
Yeah. So this opens up a wall to kind of the western side of the level, where we get these horse warriors who send energy around the platforms that they're on. So enemies that will make platforms hot or cold, and then you take them out to stop that oscillation.
Yes. You proceed up this tangled collection of one-way rooms, and eventually meet Johnny B. Johnny B has put up a bunch of these greenstone walls we've seen around the village trying to protect it. And he says he has the power to create rules, but he makes fun rules. He's not like Augustus. So he does a new rule, which gives you a missile launcher, the Johnny B missiles, which you can do that. Again, everything is just called something like magical realism gone too far. Dark chocolate.
So yeah, you get these missiles. This will let you destroy green stone walls. Hey Gary, I'm gonna say something that is going to make you fucking insane.
Yeah,
we can take a break if you need to. Johnny B is modeled after John Blow. That's who that's supposed to be.
Oh, I didn't notice that. That doesn't make me feel insane.
Okay.
I'm so wrapped up on him making a new rule which allows you to get a missile.
John Blow making fun rules, though.
Yes. That's all. John Blow does not make fun rules. Yeah. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
So the artist who makes the rules decided you can have missiles as art. Now you have art missiles that you can use to open up stone walls and then are also a weapon. But you don't want to use them as weapons because then if you use them as weapons too much, you might get to a stone wall, not be able to get past it, and have to backtrack all the way to camp.
Yes. This can be this stands in for the rapid fire infinite range weapon that you need to do. The fact that it's limited, though, does make it too precious to use, especially early on.
Yes. Yeah. So we use this, we get to the village center, and we hear this loud thumping behind the door to the Temple of Creation.
Yes.
We walk in here and we get our first boss fight, where Augustus, Augustus, the interminable fogey.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's called something like that. It's very funny.
When I think of a fogey, I think of Abe Simpson. Yeah.
Yeah. This is M. Bison's head. It's a gigantic Nazi head. You fight.
Yeah. And it's neat. So it is just his head, and we're in this small square room. And he will reach forward with his big fists to attack you, and sends out his little army of fox spearmen also to throw damage, throw projectiles at you. And you can only attack when his head is in the foreground. So he is just dodge during the attack phase, then he makes himself vulnerable.
Yep, you shoot him enough times, and it goes into a second phase, which is like the big mechanical dragon from Mega Man 2.
Yes.
He kind of runs away from you. You're not being chased. He kind of runs away from you, and you have to move to the right, keeping up, while he lets out little foxmen and shoots little beams. So you have to dodge, between these things to avoid it, or not his beams, his little projectiles, and kill the foxmen to get close enough to damage him.
Yeah. And it's fun. Like it is fun to introduce and build this fight around automatic scrolling, right? I will like that for a fight. I don't like it for a whole level. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. I think there's 3 boss fights in this game that I did. All 3 are winners. Like it cannot, I don't want to, I've been pretty down on this, and I am a little down on it, but all 3, I gotta give credit where it's due. All 3 of them are good. This one included.
Yes. Yeah.
After you beat him, you get to Lazuli. This is the woman who's been calling out to you this whole time. She's on a throne beyond the boss room. She thanks you for defeating Augustus and gives you the Stone of Creation, which allows you to leap further when there's a specific doodad nearby.
Right.
And again, like that's not what the Stone of Creation should mean. Like when the willy-nilly way in which this game uses words, and it's translation, it's not willy-nilly, but it just ends up feeling very strange to me. Like a Stone of Creation, I would assume would create things. It not let you jump further when you're next to a mechanical doodad.
Right. Effectively, this just creates one-way jumps to get across larger areas. Yeah. Using this, we can get to the village outskirts, which is kind of this crossroads between several regions. You can go south to get to the Primal Woods, but there's not too much you can do there yet. Most of it is locked off behind this big kind of like water wheel looking thing, this ancient device that won't move until you have something else. If you head up, there is a locked door, like there's a platform that should be able to flip, but doesn't. The only way forward is to head east toward this colossal bridge.
Yes. And we run into Lazuli again, standing at the mouth of the bridge. It's been shattered into pieces, and she's created a path we can make our way through that, but it's just one way.
Right.
And says, listen, you're going to be on Eldarian turf if you head through. It's not one way. We're going to come back later.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's going to be one way.
So we zip over using the little device, and we have some new things over here. We have acid bubbles that are spawned by devices that will follow you very slowly. These will pile up if you do not deal with them, so it's good to do that. And we also have these floating shielded enemies that will charge you while shielded and only be vulnerable after they have charged. So basically
refract.
Yeah.
So you dodge and shoot.
Dodge and shoot.
Yeah, you go up to the ceiling, let them charge past, then shoot them.
Yeah. And then we have these special platforms that are like momentum platforms. So in order to move them along this rail, you have to shoot backwards and kind of have your inertia carry you.
Yeah. Which again, seems like a cool idea. There's just a lot going on in any of those individual moments.
Yeah.
This brings us to the Intention Capital, which is like a purple neon techno location. There's 2 ways in. If you go down, you run into this gold guy in a round turret who follows you on a track, shooting you. This is obnoxious. The front entrance takes you to some hallways with blocks in it that you can rotate by shooting while standing on them. They basically have the momentum, except they rotate on a little pivot. And some one-way spike walls through there. And you're kind of using these platforms both as cover. Bullets are coming in from the side, so you want the bullet to hit the wrong side of the platform, shoot to put yourself, to rotate the platform so you can make the jump. Everything is coming down to a timed execution challenge in this, but this is at least a new one.
Right. Yeah. For flavor, there are these glowing, flickering portraits of a bald man around. We're going to find out this is Eldar. His appearance is real cool when we actually get to see him. In a chest near one of those, we find the bracers of the patient. It says, spend energy in faith and patience. Danger will pass through, causing no harm. I had no idea what this was supposed to mean until I used it. Bracer, patience, faith and patience. It's a shield. It's a shield that costs energy to put up.
Faith and patience don't mean those things. Again, I can't, it's hard for me to get over this. It's good to have this. This is one of the only power-ups you get in this that I find legitimately useful. Because you don't just use it. There are, rest assured, there are lock and key scenarios where you have to use this.
Yes.
But it can actually just be used as well, which is a nice change.
Yeah. It's just real, eat the Boney's eggs to get their sense of humor.
Yes.
Okay. Humor. Cool.
Yeah. Love eating the Boney's eggs to get a sense of humor.
Yeah. I can't get past the golden turret guys, even with the shield, just because they're everywhere. They follow you along entirely. So I bounce up through this kind of chimney that's clogged with a bunch of roots in order to get to this new area, the Remembrance Desert.
Yes. When we get here, Lazuli reaches out, says, "Hey, I'm sorry to have to see the desert in this state. This used to be a place where treasure items were infused with memories were stored." And she says she has a friend here who lives here, a caretaker of time and memory.
Yes. And we're going to meet him. He's a big beardo who's depressed.
Yep. The writer.
Yes. This is huge. It is a huge level, kind of vaguely desert Egyptian themed a little bit. And there's not a lot to differentiate it mechanically right away. We're going through and we're kind of passing by some of these things that look like they should be moving, that are marked with a skull symbol. This is neat to me. The idea that going in is easy, but once you get the power up can cut against you, and the power up charges the things that are going to become actual challenges.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like a place that's different leaving than it is going in. Yeah. You eventually do that. You make your way through the slightly easier version. You reach this chamber with our big sad beardo.
Yeah.
He despairs over his works being turned to sand and just sends you away.
Right.
Beyond him is a room with this big maw guarding a door. We're going to run into several of these. There is just a formula for fighting these things. It drives me nuts. It's the same formula for fighting most things, but it being stationary makes it feel very obvious.
Yeah.
You can only shoot him from one place. And there's also a place where he can chomp you, so the timing is very tight.
Yes. Yeah. He guards the Rock of Remembrance. It says its reminiscence of ancient paths will make them open before me. This activates those skull machines.
Yes. Yep. Those blocks and machinery, anything marked with a skull, now comes to life when you're near them. So this opens a bunch of paths, but creates these new traps. Those big spinning wheels that were in our way before now move. So now they move, we can jump onto one part of it and be rotated up to where we need to go.
Right. It's like a revolving door kind of thing. So we use this to get into previously inaccessible places. And we find this place called the Memories Shaft, which will generate a beam to open certain paths. It shoots out of the skull. It's a weapon. So this is confusing because it says this will create a beam to open new paths. Instead, this is an alternate attack where you shoot out a little skull and then it shoots a laser perpendicular to the surface that it's on. And it lasts for a short amount of time, but also you can't cross it. It'll make you take damage.
Yes. It basically makes you set up a laser thing. But it's not, you're right. It is not a thing that will open the new path. At least as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Like it can feel like the words in this aren't doing a thing. Like it might just be a localization pass.
I don't know, man. Yeah.
It's hard to tell. It's really, really hard to tell. I don't know what needed to make this, come across.
Yeah. It's a lot. I don't know, because I want to extend them benefit of the doubt, just like I want to extend any greater benefit of the doubt. It feels different here to where the localization might be affecting like clarity of mechanics and what purposes are than, oh, this would be funny if you read it in the actual language as opposed to when it was butchered when it was brought across the seas.
Yeah,
right?
It's not just a tone thing.
Yeah.
It's like, and that comes across where it's like, oh, this joke is hilarious in Japanese or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not what's happening here. It's things are just not being explained to the player.
Yeah.
And it's not purposeful. It doesn't feel like, it's hard to tell what the purpose is, right?
Yeah.
I'm cognizant of the fact that we're doing this right before another game that also is very purposely oblique.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it was more successful at being oblique.
Yes.
This oblique element just felt weird and frustrating to me.
I ended up wasting a lot of energy trying to use this to, maybe this will be what flips those platforms.
Yes.
Because the description very directly said, oh yeah, this will open up new paths. And it doesn't.
Yeah. The dark side of this being so vague.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the level is generally tougher now. There are lots of laser traps that activate when you get close. There are one-way paths because of the activation skulls. Kind of moving things around. But we reach this chamber. It's kind of like a clock. And you move the arms around to get to the center where you get another health, another Estus flask use out of it. Yeah.
Yep. We head back through to this circular chamber where the Rock of Remembrance that we had opens up a face at the center. And this starts another boss fight, another classic. This is Belia, the Stonehearted.
Yeah.
And this boss is the level.
Yeah.
It's this giant heart that's at the center of this chamber. It telegraphs attacks, shooting these little lightning waves. And then you have to get out of the way and or you'll be killed instantly. Mm-hmm. If you do enough damage, the waves fill the entire chamber. So you have to jump onto it in order to get pushed out into the outer ring.
Yes.
Of that. You kind of get shunted out.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to like work around to the entrance that you used to get back in the first place, getting around kind of these advancing walls that are chasing you, and then enemies and spikes and stuff.
Yeah, lasers.
This is real cool.
This is great.
I think that this is extremely successful. I normally would be pretty against the instant death aspect of the lightning attacks. It's telegraphed so far in advance.
Yes.
And it keeps you moving. Like everything about this is about the movement. And nothing is stopping you from damaging the heart when you are in there, aside from maybe I don't have enough time to charge and shoot and still get out of the way.
What's interesting is that I think this would be that instant death thing would be really bad with tighter margins.
Yes.
Like as is the fact that I have like moving around is still awkward. It never disappeared for me in this game. The fact that I had so much time made this work. Mm-hmm. It would have been if you had, 75% as much time.
Yeah.
It would have made this a lot harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. But fun, like good, fun boss fight there.
Yeah.
Afterwards, a face appears in the heart. We talk to it. This is the spirited heart. Her blood vessels spread like roots and sprout leaves. And she hid away because she was afraid to feel joy again for fear that she'd lose it.
Hashtag relatable.
She says, there's a place that we can go now, which she was blocking access to.
Yes.
These are the hidden realms. And these are the challenge areas introduced in the Trials of Fear expansion. Like a Dark Souls, you get to go to the DLC about 2/3 of the way through the game.
So now we're headed back to the Intention Capital. Like for me, it was about having the shield and some extra health and heals. I had another dungeon to level up. This allowed me to get through the gauntlet of tracking turrets.
Yep, you got to be able to tank it. Yeah. You get down here, the majority of the screens here are more movable platforms on rails, that you can move with momentum. And a new kind of monster, these triangle monsters, these polygon guys whose projectiles travel horizontally, then vertically to hit you. They take an L shape. I'd like to send out a special fuck you.
Yeah, God,
these horrible Dorito monsters. I would erase them from the earth if I could.
I would erase this attack. I love the design of the little Dorito monsters. Like, we're in the logic zone. It's made of polygons and math and stuff. And they have they have like a constant look of as they're doing it, which I always enjoy. It's just this L shape, especially when there are multiples of them. It ends up it's not mandatory damage, and obviously I could have gotten good, but again, this control scheme never disappeared.
Yeah, it just didn't feel like, yes, I could have. Like you can do that with anything. Like you can dedicate your life to anything and master anything. Like, of course you could. It just felt harder than it should have for where I was in the game, because I would simply step to the side. There's nothing in the game's lore or diegetics that you can't.
Yeah.
Any reason, there's no gravity, but you're stuck to the floor. You're stuck to these white areas. You can still sidestep. That's what's frustrating about it. This game executes its worst, but it reminds me a lot of when I was playing Half-Life Alyx as well, which is a game I like quite a bit more than this, but I kept running into situations where I'm like, why can't I just walk down the stairs?
Yeah.
And it was just, because I was doing the throw teleport in that because of motion sickness things. And that is awkward.
Yeah.
That like also never disappeared for me. The things around that were much better.
Yeah.
I like that game, but it had a similar feeling. And that it's also to kind of show how subjective this is. Like that disappeared for you, because you didn't have to do the throw teleport. Like
I was more used to VR. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think we also just have different inner ears.
True.
Like that just get activated by different things. So like, there are probably people who are playing this and are like, no, this just makes perfect sense to me. This feels great in my hands. I'm not that person though.
Yeah.
Like it just never got there. Yeah. Afterwards we get around this room called the perfect container, which has a chest we walk into that has the logic blast in it, which is a reflecting shot.
Yeah.
There.
This ends up being very useful because you can shoot it in a way that it'll bounce back and forth a few times, doing damage multiple times. This ended up being extremely useful for some of the later encounters where you needed to put out a bunch of DPS.
Yep.
If you head downward and east, you reach a mini boss arena where you get the first of your kind of polygon grim reapers, monster with a scythe who kind of floats and charges at you. This is around the point where it started feeling like attacks were doing too much damage to me. 2, 3, 4 hearts at a time.
Yes.
On a limited health bar. Is what it felt like, and the enemy damage sponginess was also kind of like there's a point of intersection here where both of those got a little bit out of hand.
Some of these fights take a really long time.
Yeah.
The way that health works in this is you have hearts and you can lose them in half heart increments, but they scale up very quickly. So it's not like Isaac or whatever, where like if you get hit, it's a half a heart. It just is. Enemies will do unpredictable until you get hit amount of damage to you.
Yeah. Additionally, I noticed the kind of short invincibility window after being hit. It ended up being kind of Roxbury to death by a few different things, especially in the final area.
Yeah. Past this, we get to the Cradle of Intention. We interact with this big crystal generator to obtain the Stone of Intention. This says unlocks new angles for its carriers. And this allows you to flip the flippable platforms.
Yep.
Which we've been counting. So if you've been waiting this whole game to find a thing that allows you to flip platforms, you're in luck 3 times over, because fully half the upgrades you get in this allow you to move platforms or flip them.
Flip heads rejoice, your time has come.
Finally. If you enjoy flipping platforms, you will like this game.
Oh gosh.
Jesus. The least empowering Metroidvania power-ups I've ever experienced in a video game.
Yeah.
We go to leave. Lazuli speaks to us. He's like, talks to us about how sterile and lifeless that place is, because that's the way that Eldar chooses to live.
and he's seeking to impose it on everybody else.
Yep. He wants everyone to be in a geometry zone.
Right.
Yeah.
And we, pass by and we see that these portraits that we've been looking at are Eldar. We can examine them. There have been a few like lore examination point kind of deals. This is the first one that was anything to make note of.
Yes.
It describes Eldar as a figure with a golden face. He is symmetric in every way, down to the smallest detail.
Yes. So now that we have this movement item and we can flip brand new kinds of platforms, we can access this new area. Way back before the Shattered Bridge. We can make our way back there. We flip the platform and get to this area that has this huge swirling vortex in the background.
Yeah.
And we're in the Dreamlands now. Lazuli warns us this is a place that is and isn't there.
Yeah. This looks real cool on the map. It's just a big kind of galaxy swirl. There is no actual mapping out of the areas where you're in, because when you jump in, you're in a nowhere space, nowhere from Silent Hill. It is disconnected and incoherent.
Yep.
And seems to loop on itself several times.
Yes. So we can go through these different spokes from here. And one of them, we get a new attack, the Anxiety Spark, which sounds like an energy drink. This uses a big chunk of your energy, but creates this damaging spark that stays where the shot hits for a while. So it'll allow you to do DPS against a stationary enemy.
If you're listening to this while playing along with the game, get the Anxiety Spark. It is the key that unlocks the final boss.
Yes.
I was not able to beat it until I got this.
It's certainly a good weapon for sure. The area ends with a mini boss fight against two of these stick figure wizard guys, who are funny to me, but you're just doing the same things you've been doing the whole game.
The end of this is a chamber with this big moon, and cradled in the crescent moon there, you find this item called the Pearl of Dreams. And this is where fast travel has been hiding. It is pretty much at the end of the game.
Yes. I found, so the way that I got through the boss, like Anxiety Spark was helpful, but I ended up doing a thing that I like doing it when I want to do it, but I don't like doing it when I feel like I have to, which is fast travel to all the zones and start collecting Ridley Dink power-ups.
Yes.
Which is what I did once I had this. I'm like, I'm taking too much damage. I don't have enough health. I'm going to go scour.
Yeah.
And just, put 45 minutes on the clock. Let's try to find stuff.
Right.
And ended up doing that. That is kind of how I powered through this bit.
Like a fifth of my playtime was building up to get to get through the final boss.
Yes. Yeah. So we can now warp to this camp that we saw through the Golden Wall. And this gets us inside the workings of the Golden Wall. I like this bit in terms of like a cool twist. Like once you have fast travel, a campsite you've never been to is on your list.
Yeah. Like you could see it, but you couldn't use it. Yeah.
Yep. It reminds me of the really cool thing in Divinity Original Sin 2, how you find those teleport crystals that will teleport to their other one. And the way you get the other one is by using the one you find. Like you don't know where it's going. It's just like, I'll just take me where this thing is and I'll figure it out. It reminds me of that.
God, I really need to replay DOS 2.
Play DOS 1. DOS 1 is really good.
Yeah. And probably should play DOS 1.
Like it's got some people really prefer the combat system. It doesn't have the resistance thing. And the story is not nearly as good. Like I'm just here to tell you that. But the encounters and stuff are great. The encounter, the emergency gameplay stuff in it is just as good.
Yeah. There's so much stuff I need to play otherwise, but yeah, any mention of DOS, especially people going to it after Baldur's Gate 3 and rediscovering it for the first time, made me think, God, that's such a good game.
It plays so good on the Switch too. I've had like my buddy comedy playthrough with the dwarf and with Ifin. It's just two bros going through doing the trait that allows you, that gives you bonuses if you just have two people. In me for a long time. I just haven't done it.
Yeah. And that was a segment where we talked about a game we actually like.
I recommend, DOS. But anywho, like that happens there too.
Right.
A version of this, but I like this here too. Like, it'd be like if you pulled up the list of bonfires and there was a bonfire you hadn't heard of that you could walk to. Like that's a really cool, mysterious idea. That's how we get in.
Yes. And we work around. This wall is powered by like hamster wheels. The thing that is driving the automation of large parts of this are what appears to be horsemen running on these wheels. When you destroy them, the horse head disappears. It's just a guy in a costume.
Yes.
But this will stop the lasers and make it easier to kind of get around this big square wall.
Yes. Orderly hamster wheels.
Yes.
You can go around the inside of the wall, take out more of these horse wheels until you get to the main gate, where you can take out the two bad moving turrets that we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
There's a nice little revengeness to this. And this opens the gate, allowing us to get into the final area of the base game, the Golden Fortress.
Right. This is where I began. This is where the running out of patience really hit.
Yeah. When you turn on the more checkpoints, which is nice. But we talk about, at least for me, and other people feel differently, and that's fine. I don't like the challenge very much in a video game of like, you start at a checkpoint, here's the thing you have to execute, then you have to execute this thing, then you have to execute this thing. There's 3 rooms. There's kind of a way to do it. If you don't do it, just start over from the beginning of the 3 rooms.
Yeah.
I much prefer, I'm not even that big a fan of this game, but I much prefer the Celeste approach of just like each room is a discrete challenge. We're not trying to do cumulative stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what this does, where like when you beat a room, you don't just need to think like, did I get through it? You also have to think like, did I take stupid damage? And it has what I consider to be a demoralizing feeling, which is I may as well just start over now.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm thinking I may as well just start over now, like that feels bad and artificial to me. It's not what Dandara would do. It kills the fantasy a little bit for me.
Yeah. And turning on the respawning in each individual room, if that was the way that this worked by default, the entire Estes system would need to be thrown out or reworked. You would need to fall back to enemies will drop things that will heal you or replenish this, because respawning means that respawning on every screen means that for every screen you have ridiculous numbers of heals to be able to use. Yeah.
But I would question how much Estes healing really adds to this game anyway.
Yeah.
It feels like that, the finding your souls, like this is a really good poster child, I think, for a game that has souls like DNA but doesn't need it.
Yeah.
Like that's something that people have been talking about for a while, who are getting frustrated with Dark Souls influence on video games. And generally, like, I don't mind it. Even when it's not, it wasn't additive to fight your ghost in Hollow Knight to get your souls back. Like that probably didn't need it, but it wasn't odious.
Right.
Here, it just feels like a lot of that stuff just feels arbitrarily added to me.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's this way.
Yeah. Just arbitrary and kind of like mistakenly viewed as being obligatory.
Yes.
It's just like, oh yeah, this is how Metroidvanias work now.
Well, and it's also, it's a load bearing or like a constellation of problems a little bit, where like, the idea, if I try to put my mind in the dev, the idea is you have to go through this series of rooms that are really hard. You have Estes level number of mistakes you get to make, which is how Dark Souls 1 works.
Yes.
I think that the actual rooms and working your way through them and the verbs you're doing to make your way through them are not expressive or don't allow, when that happens in Dark Souls, you try something different.
Yes.
If I use all my Estus going between the first, Undead Berg bonfire and the Taurus demon, I try different approaches to those encounters.
Yeah.
You can take different routes sometimes. You can try different weapons. You can build your character in a different way. You can try running past stuff. You can learn how to parry. You have a lot of things you can do. In this, when that happens, there's nothing you can do. It's just the slapping your wrist and saying, try it better.
Yeah, like there is a little bit of variation at this point, because we've gotten a bit of a stable of or arsenal rather of a kind of like alternate attacks we could do, and our energy meter by this point is pretty high up. So you can mess around with either using the shield or using the individual weapons, but none of them are especially effective for taking things out quicker. It's more about dealing with things from different angles, getting past the limitation of the short range of your basic attack.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not nothing. It's just, I guess, on the gradient. It's not.
Yeah,
it's insufficient, at least for my taste.
Yeah.
So you continue. There are flags here with the Eldarian logo, which is a square with diagonal slashes here. The main path is straight down, but there are these locked gates.
Yeah.
So we can't do that. We have to wind around these side sections and go through these challenge rooms with these Minotaur enemies on top of buzzsaws, and then bullet hell projectiles throughout them.
Yeah.
It gave me huge Blasphemous 2. Like, just do, arena after arena.
Yeah.
Time to do challenge rooms because it's the end of the game.
Mm-hmm. An aesthetic note that I like is there are little eyes staring at you from the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of in the dark space behind them. It does feel, a little bit surveillance-y, and kind of paranoid in a cool way.
Yes. Again, you kill more horse wheels there, and the final gate is opened by this lever at the end of a really long gauntlet.
Yeah.
Get through. You move through this. At the bottom of the main chamber is the control chamber. The main path is the control chamber, and you bounce through these spotlights to reach this room with a giant television screen displaying a test signal, like a modern ass test signal.
Yeah.
And this is our final boss. Super cool presentation here.
Yeah. Eldar appears on it, sitting in this opulent room, swirling a glass of wine, and speaking like, hey, I only want the best for the salt. Have you considered why nobody else is trying to stop me? Like you might be, you're in the wrong here. Right.
Yes.
Your side, this creation can only cause suffering. The intention side with logic and order provides security. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Let my golden walls spread. Imagine the golden stories the writer will create. The peace we will all finally have here. I'm sorry you went through all this, but nothing will change. Die.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be the new I ain't reading all that. Just putting the clip of this where it's like, I'm sorry you went through all this, but nothing will change. Die. But then we get again a banger boss fight.
Yes,
this boss fight against Eldar.
Yeah, Eldar, the outer voice. We're not finding Eldar himself here. It is Eldar on the TV screen. We are in this small square room, and the TV is about 1/3 the size of the room, and it will telegraph its smash attacks by which way the scan lines go. Like when it glitches out, like when the vertical or horizontal hold gives out, and it will do the smash. And that's an instant death smash. It's telegraphed enough to where it doesn't feel terrible. I did this enough to do it without taking any damage, which is fine. But this is all about dodging around the side of this and dealing damage in time while also avoiding his kind of bullet hell stuff.
He does slams. He also does like the slow inexorable move towards a location as well. Like this is cool. This is a good fight.
Yeah.
But of course, multiple phases. You beat him. Horns erupt out of the TV. And we're taken to the circular fight to fight them, Eldar, the Relentless Choir, which is a gigantic ovum with sperms around it.
Yes.
I'm not being, facile. There's nothing this resembles more. Like there are little sperm projectiles that go around this gigantic egg.
Yeah.
We are mixing our metaphors. Like here, it's like when Lemongrab confronted like the big Granfaloon thing, and just like metaphors are being thrown out. Like if you are the head atop the ziggurat, then the stairs that reach you must be infinite. It's all just metaphor shit. So now sterility is literally a baby, like a pregnancy symbolism thing. And I'm like, well, wouldn't that be the opposite?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that be creation? I don't like, again, it is too vague and too zoomed out to make a sense to me.
And also I didn't kill Eldar. I killed the visual representation of him. So if this is a rebirth, then what did I destroy?
Yes.
I'm not being intentionally dense. I hope.
Well, when you look up stuff about this, there's not a whole lot of like story analysis and stuff. Like I was trying to find more talking about this. So I talked about trying to find kind of more critical grounding on this because I felt so confused by it. And I didn't end up finishing it because I found it late. But I found a YouTube which talks about the ties to Brazilian mythology that are in this. And that's interesting. Like I want to watch that, you know, because that sounds neat. It still doesn't change the text.
Yeah.
It having these references are not narrative. A reference is not a symbol.
Yeah.
Like it's not actually accomplishing greater literary weight than a wink in some of these cases. And it just ended up feeling like this is a really cool idea. I fight a giant TV until I fight a egg as it's being possibly impregnated. Like I'm literally in the danger zone when it's like, I got a bun in the oven and then the guy's wearing the shirt that says I provided the batter. I'm right there at ground zero. And I've always wanted to fight a boss fight literally at the moment of conception. Of human conception. But as it just, I don't know what it means. It feels like it would be the opposite. It feels like this would not be the sterile golden idea that is technology and sterility, and logic.
Yeah.
So it has a crust on the outside of it, like all eggs, and you have to break the crust undamaged inside, even though the crust reforms.
Yeah.
And you can land on the crust when it's reformed to dodge sperm projectiles.
Yeah.
Little sperms that fly out and swim around.
Your movement space is kind of the entire concentric circle around the egg itself.
Yes.
And you have the sperm projectiles. It is also sweeping around with a laser quite a bit, and it will spam these little mask ads. When I say that, like, this took a long time, it's not necessarily because I think it is, any combination of these things demands too much. It was a function of I didn't have enough resources to soak the mistakes that felt inherent that I was going to make. It was just a numbers thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. You eventually you can certainly get through. These bosses are more fair than a lot of the encounter rooms feel.
Yeah.
Like getting through them purely skill-based feels more doable. It is a thing where that can run into patience though as well.
Yeah.
Where I'm taking more risk because I want the fight to be over.
Yes.
Like I could do this and not get hurt, but I just need to get it done.
Yeah.
And like that is on me, but it's also a feeling that was, nurtured by game decisions.
Everything that led up to it. Yeah.
Yeah. You dodge all the sperm, and you destroy the ovum. And there's a little like kind of wiggling. This is great. Little conjoined remains in the core of the egg that you can't reach until the walls start moving in, closer for you to destroy it.
Yeah. It's a like wiggling, conjoined, incomplete homunculi of Eldar, right?
Yes.
And that starts the ending. Dandara gets this glimpse of the changes soon to come, and just in the desert of remembrance, the bearded writer, begins writing these stories of freedom again. Now that the forces of intention are gone.
Yes, that is where the game ended for me. I did not do the Trials of Fear.
Yes.
For this, tell me about the Trials of Fear.
Yeah. So like we said, after you beat the heart boss, Belia, these kind of maws open up around the salt, each of them kind of giving you passage to corresponding places in this new map, the Hidden Realms. This is generally harder than the main game. Lots of spikes, lots of kind of platform hell kind of things, way fewer safe places to go, and these very durable kind of like enemies that are made out of like this crimson goop. Like aesthetically, it's rad as hell. I like it quite a bit. The thing that it adds mechanically is a lot of timing-based puzzles where you have to, ring these bells in a certain amount of time and then get around to where it is, the door that opens gets there. And of course, they're enemies, and you go across like larger and larger spans. And it's not clear what you're doing here for a while. Like you have to get to the center. And then you reach the kind of the quest givers here. The main story, you are completing these challenges given to you by these three masters that are mentors to these other allegorical manifestations like Dandara and Eldar, right? This is kind of the unshaped realm that those entities came from, right?
Yes.
And just like there's a John Blow present in the main game. The masters are themed after the creators of these things that inspired the game Dandara itself, and the challenge areas they preside over are also themed after those. So you have the adventurous one in this technological space area called the Pioneer Facility, and it is kind of modeled after the creator of Metroid, or the producer of Metroid, Yoshio Sakamoto. The Privileged Keep is Gothic themed, headed by the Noble One, who is modeled after Koji Igarashi, so it's kind of Castlevania themed. And then the Enduring Fortress is medieval themed, headed by the Persistent One, who is modeled after Hidetaka Miyazaki, and is Dark Souls themed.
Yeah, and kind of a cute idea.
Yeah. And it's challenge fuck. There are tons of new bosses. I've looked at videos of them. They also have what appears to be pretty cool gimmicks. I didn't get to a boss in this one. Just didn't end up working out for me. But yeah, all of this culminates when you finish this. You wake up a couple of NPCs. You talk to this woman who has kind of like locked herself away and kind of given up hope of changing anything. And this makes it so after you defeat Eldar, you fight the true final boss of this world, which is Tormenta, which is the ultimate destructive force, even more destructive than pure order, which is the natural tendency of the salt to have kind of like an ideological inertia. It is the embodiment of resistance to change, which is the subversion of the metaphor that I like. At least theming wise, right?
Yeah, I like the idea of that too.
Yeah.
Like there's so many little romantic hallmarks in this that like, this is one of the ultimate games. I feel like if you hear it described purely on terms, it sounds like it's going to be pretty sick.
Yeah.
Like, creative stagnation is the force of the world, that is happening here, but it's having a real effect on the actual world.
Yes.
It's not just Alan Wake 2. And you're going through and you are winning that back through, and people are helping you through art and song and stuff, until eventually what you actually face is the inertia, which is the thing that's keeping that going.
Yes.
That's a great idea. That sounds romantic. Like that sounds like a romantic, and when I say romantic, I don't mean love based. I mean like, like hopeful, kind of thing.
Aspiring to, something immaterial, right?
Yes. And also not a theme that we see a lot, in terms of things. That's all great. You can't do that though and have the song just be that certain platforms will flip over, like tech platforms. Like it bungles that execution on two levels. Like one, in terms, I think, of making, paying off the investment in that kind of romantic idea, but then two, in terms of being fun to play, having neat, cool things that you were doing, neat, new gameplay challenges, getting new abilities that open up and recontextualize space, all these things that you want from this genre, and from video games in general, you're just kind of not getting. IMO. It left me real cold.
Yeah.
Objectively, I don't think it's a horrible game, and there are admirable things about it, but I did not like it. Didn't like playing it.
Yeah. Same, pretty much, right? Like I went into it with all the goodwill in the world, wanting to enjoy it. Like I even went in like not necessarily knowing the backstory. Didn't even know that the developers were Brazilian, right? That was something that I discovered like halfway through this, and I was like, okay, cool. That gives me a little bit of a bump. I wanted to look for these things and try and see it more, a little bit more benefit of the doubt, right? It's just the play wasn't there. And so when I talk about like this is an experiment worth doing, ultimately what I arrive at is this might not, it's worth doing, but it might not have been worthwhile to pursue further. Right.
Yeah. It frustrates me and makes me sad, because all I want, like one of the big things I want from games is, and we talk about this a lot, I like the idea of games that come from other cultures a lot.
Yes.
We get a lot of games about, American, European, Western culture, and a lot of games about Japanese culture, and very few other places.
Yes.
And it has always felt, that binary has always felt bad to me, as a thing, because there's a whole world, like there are game developers everywhere.
Yeah.
And when we run into something that is from another country, a lot of times those are really pleasant surprises.
Yes.
Like you and I are both really into the Eastern European like flavor of, you know, your pathologic stalker, like absolutely bleak core take on this stuff that is new. It feels fresh.
Yeah.
You know, it is dealing with themes and things that we don't see. You know, it's not friendship is good or America is great. The two themes you get.
The two speeds you can move.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's not that. And this felt like an opportunity for that. And there's a glimmer of it. It's just the execution. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't, embody it as I was playing. And it bummed me out.
And Brazil, I know you're the 5th largest country in the world. I'm sorry, you only have one shot.
Yeah. They're probably, I bet you if you look up Brazilian games, there are probably other things.
There's probably so many. Like something that is true about Brazil is there is a huge homebrew community for the Sega Genesis Mega Drive.
Yeah.
So like that's where a ton of development was happening, and some of those are wild as hell if you look at them. Brazil, it's a gigantic country, has problems, but also tons of creative people doing cool stuff. This is something that hit out, and this not succeeding is not an indictment of a whole country and people.
Of course not. Yeah. When I searched Brazilian games, one of the things that the evil website Google brings up is Momodora. I don't know if that creator is Brazilian, but if so, like, there we go. Right. Also a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
And just like a phenomenal one. So yeah, I don't know. It is hard to tell.
Yeah.
Regardless of which, though, like, I'm happy to have this behind us.
Yeah.
This was, I should do this work. I don't want to.
Yeah.
And not to complain, like I have a dream job, but it's just, in terms of the game, it was a thing that if it wasn't for the show, I would have quit.
Yes. It's also the position in the schedule didn't do this any favors. Coming hot off of a Spider-Man game where non-traditional traversal is just such a joy, and then heading into Lunacid, which is one of the best kind of like representations of a kind of obtuseness, and a revival of a series that we really love, Kingsfield kind of stuff. It was never going to stand up in comparison to either of those things.
On top of also it not being too long since we've done Blasphemous 2.
Yes.
So there's also even a little bit of Metroid fatigue going on in there. Like and that's our fault for scheduling. To be fair, I didn't really know what this game was before I played it. And when you read about it, you can see Metroidvania, but because of the control scheme, I don't really know what that's going to mean.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a whiff for me. But, no big deal. Like it's still, I'm so glad I played it because it did have things that are worth bouncing off of.
Yeah. So thank you, Micah.
Big thanks to Micah. If you are listening to this and you want to, or if you're not demographically identical to us, and you have a project you'd like us to highlight, you can send me an email at Gary@Duckfeed.tv, include pronouns, links, a description, things like that. And we'd be happy to shout it out. We don't have anything right now. So short line, if you have something you'd like us to call out. If you would like to patronize an episode, if you'd like to sponsor one like Micah did, you can do so at patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. Yeah.
You get tons of cool stuff. Lots of content, even before you get to the executive production tier. Not tier, the item that you buy from the Patreon shop. Things are getting complicated now.
Yes. If you have thoughts about Dandara, you can write in. By April 15th. And that you can also do that if you have thoughts about Lunacid and Super Mario World, our premium episode for that month. If you have thoughts about multiple versions of those games, please write in multiple times. And same goes for Maze games, which are Driver San Francisco, Plague Inc., Realms of the Haunting, and Tunic.
Yes. Deadline is the 15th of May. And you already said the thing that I usually say, the separating things in. Oh, yes. Try to keep your responses brief and specific. That does ensure, or not ensure, but makes it more likely that you'll be picked there. And we won't have to edit you. Also, if you're not going to do any of those things, you can rate or review the show at whatever podcast directory you get this from. And spread the word. Write about us. Tell your friends. There's tons of episodes. We've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We did a little digression about Divinity Original Sin 2. Let's say you're a fan of that game. You probably like Baldur's Gate 3. If you do, listen to Real Lich Hours.
Please.
And tell people about it. And join us in thanking our producer, Gwen, who edited this episode. We appreciate Gwen.
Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah. And I think that's about it.
Yeah. I think so.
What should they watch out for until next time?
Until next time, watch out for those eggs.